good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for investing your time with us this Thursday evening. My name is Maria Fuertes, and I am the director of the Practice Heroes program at CareStack. We're very happy to have you take part of our, it's our 8th series of Dinner with the Practice Heroes. My goodness, that's. Hey, by the way, I mean, it's been great having everybody here on our for dinner, if you will. So you're going to have to stay towards the end of our event, making sure that you hang out with us so that we can give you the information on how to get your $25 Grubhub. So our goal today is that you will come away with understanding, knowledge, and pearls of wisdom, if you will, that you can apply to be more successful in your business. And just want to talk about the format to give you an idea what to expect tonight. We'll take a few moments for each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their background in the industry. By the way, if you hear some whimpering, we've got Lulu, the doggy that's with us tonight.
We're dog sitting. Yes,
we're dog sitting. So we're kind of like feeling a little bit off, but that's okay. It's part of the world, right? It's all Zoom now. But I'll also kick off the conversation by highlighting tonight's topics. Throughout the webinar, feel free to ask your questions in the chat box below. We want to make sure that we want to keep this interactive. However, if we don't get to it, we'll have more Q&A towards the end. Make sure you put your questions in the chat box below. And once again, don't forget to stick with us to the end. Sounds good. So let's get started. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's amazing guests. We've got Alicia Gerard, Ashley Brownfield, Jackie Lauterbach, all have extensive experience in the dental space. As you can see, our speakers are passionate about keeping your schedules full, and they will be sharing their tips and wisdom with you tonight on how to do it right. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers.
Well, thanks for having me, Maria. So we are so excited to give all of you some great action steps for keeping a full schedule. And for everyone watching, I'm Alicia Gerard. I'm located just outside Salt Lake City, Utah. 11 years ago, I started my dental career as a dental assistant, dabbled in some front desk, and then I went on to become a practice manager. I have been a user of CareStack for 2 years, and I am very passionate about this topic. I also currently assist in multiple practices with their revenue cycle management, from performing basic insurance verifications all the way to performing account audits and collaborating with the doctors and their teams on best practices and goal settings and how to obtain their goals. So I love finding solutions to problems and creating better workflows. Challenges entice me, and we all know that keeping a full schedule can be a challenge for many dental practices.
Most definitely.
Yes. I'm Ashley Brownfield. I am in Central Ohio, Columbus area. I've been in the dental industry for about 17 years now as a registered dental hygienist since 2005. But in 2010, I took a leap into the consulting world. And since then, I've been helping practices find their way to make workflows or production goals happen. And now I'm one of the practice heroes here at CareStack.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Lauterbach. I'm here with Maria in site. We're in person today.
I know, in Massachusetts.
I'm also working with CareStack. I am one of the practice heroes on our team, and I've been in the dental field for about 9 years now, developing from a admin billing position into management and also into operations management. And I can definitely resonate with both the ladies. It's a passion of ours on helping teams work efficiently, work smarter, and definitely keeping those schedules full. We know our full schedules are what really drive our practices to success. And Maria, to you.
Yes, we'll just go ahead and go to the next slide there. So we've got several topics here tonight. Let me just do this real quick. There you go. All right. So in order to keep the schedules full, we're going to have 2 sections, basically. Number 1 is being more proactive, which is creating a productive foundation. We're going to talk about templates, how to actually create productive templates. I've known that there's templates that have worked, as well as templates that don't work. And I know that the ladies are going to go through that tonight, as well as reactive steps in taking action, filling the openings, what are your go-to resource, and also looking for more opportunities that's already in your schedule, and getting those patients booked and ready to go.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Maria, for that introduction. And definitely, we're going to start off talking about how we can create productive foundations. As Maria outlined, we want to talk about some great tips and action items to help you keep your schedules full. However, before we can really dive into, useful reports or team workflows, we really want to talk about the structure of the schedule itself. So I'm going to switch over here to the next slide. And again, as Maria said, we really want to focus on proactive efforts. We really kind of have a two-part to this, wanting our schedules to be set up in a way that's proactive to ensure they're full and booked properly leading up to treatment. This first one here.
So the most effective way to keep a schedule full is by utilizing production templates, also known as template scheduling. Production templates, they're a bulletproof way to ensure that your schedule is filled with the correct mixture of those high-end procedures and low-end production. You need to have both the low and the non-production appointments, like seat crowns and small filling appointments, to schedule those in your schedule and strategically place those where you want them. This will help to increase your production. It can build efficiency in terms of what types of appointments need to be scheduled and where they need to go so there aren't any questions. And this can also be super helpful for new staff members. So it takes the thought process out of it. You can build your schedule templates, follow them, look at your results, and then tweak them to meet your needs and goals. There's a strategery to it, but no one size fits all schedules. So you have to critique it and go from there.
So Ashley, being a clinician as well as in an office, shouldn't you then as a team talk about how to create these productive schedules or templates, if you will?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that and how you can make those effectively work in your practice.
Awesome.
All right. So now that Ashley went over the positive outcomes for production templating, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details. So to start the conversation about what a production or a scheduled template would look like, we want to individually talk to the providers and team members to see what the provider's preferences are. So is your doctor a morning person and prefers to book intensive high production services in the morning? Or does your doctor prefer to have high production services right after breaks, such as lunch or first thing in the morning? So he's had kind of some time to clear his head. Or does your doctor only want to see non-production or low production right before lunch to ensure that his patients don't run into lunch? All of these are types of questions and more that need to be answered to know what you want your ideal day to look like. So an example of a schedule template would be like major restorative in the morning and low or non-producing in the afternoon. So my previous office actually scheduled this way because the doctor felt that towards the afternoon, he felt really burnt out and he would rather do a 2 or a 3 hour high producing appointment in the morning when he was fresh. In scheduling that way, it also helped his assistants prepare for the rest of the day, get their ordering and stocking done and the other assisting duties that they have when they're not actually assisting. Because while one assistant is in with his long patient in the morning, the other assistant can get all those tasks completed. So this is a dentist schedule example in CareStack with a production template. So here you can see we've got multiple chairs or multiple columns. We have some new patient spots saved in the mornings, some major restorative in the mornings, some low non-producing in the afternoons or side booked on the side. And then we've got some emergency slots in the afternoon. And then also, if you can see, 2 columns are dedicated to one doctor and the other 2 columns are dedicated to the other doctor. So they both have their own preferences of what they want their ideal schedule to look like and where they want those certain appointment types to be.
Can I ask you a question, Alicia?
Yeah.
So, I know that this looks all nice and perfect, but what happens when the day goes awry and let's say, maybe the afternoon or the morning fell apart and now maybe you need to make a switch to make the afternoon much busier. So what do you do in that case?
Of course, being in dental, that happens more often than we would like to see, but we're actually going to touch a little bit on that just a little bit later. But basically, this is what you want your ideal day to look like. if you're the day of or even the day before, you've got holes in your schedule, you're just probably going to fill those holes with whatever you can fill them with and hope that it still has a very good outcome. Because the other alternative to that is still having holes. And you don't want that when you have a full staff present at the office.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yep.
So you're going to want to try to strategically build your template blocks, reserving those valuable times and setting your own perimeters. Like Alicia said, this is your chance to build your ideal day, make it, reserve it the way you want it to work out for you. When we talk about hygiene, Maria, you can flip the slide. When we talk about those hygiene appointments, most offices will want to schedule hygiene blocks for their hygiene procedures. And this ensures plenty of time for those longer procedures like scaling and root cleaning, but it also allots for perio maintenance appointments and assures those production goals that every office should have. Perio maintenance schedule blocks are just as important to maintain the health of the patients. So you're going to want to definitely have those on the books too. Make sure that you stagger your SRP and your major doctor blocks. I know in Ohio, we can anesthetize, but in some states, those hygienists can't do that. So you don't want your doctor anesthetizing their patient and you're holed up and waiting for them to come in and help you with your SRP. And like I know as a hygienist, I would prefer one SRP in the morning and one in the afternoon so there isn't too much fatigue or burnout.
Definitely. That's a really good point, Ashley. I just wanted to tag on to that. The idea of keeping your hygiene visits, especially the more intensive ones, not right on time exactly with your doctors is definitely going to ensure for a smooth flow to the day. We all know, when our providers get kind of stressed or they're starting late, running behind on things, it definitely just puts a hiccup in the entire day. So
it's a domino effect,
right,
for sure.
definitely.
So this is an example of hygiene production template. You're going to want to make sure that that hygiene team is pre-booking all those hygiene appointments. So they have those scheduled out 6 months, 3 months, 4 months in advance. This is going to help with 85% of your recare efficiency, and it guarantees the growth of your practice within the hygiene department. It helps your patients in maintenance mode and minimizes your time staff. In hygiene, you can block for your new patients, your SRP, your perio maintenance, and the rest should be filled with your standard hygiene appointments or sealants.
Hey, Ashley, I know that
Yeah.
you are in a busy practice. Have you ever had those days where you can actually double book, meaning having assisted hygiene scheduling?
Yeah, so super hygiene days can definitely be utilized. I like to utilize those, especially on days where the kids are out of school. So if you have President's Day or through the summer months, that way you can do double production and have an assistant help out changing over rooms.
I love that name, super hygiene. It just sounds so effective.
Right.
One beauty of production templating is, like I said, you get to reserve those spots for your new patients. In busy practices, getting a new patient in the schedule sometimes can be a challenge, especially when you're booked out 2 or 3 weeks in advance. So this production templating for new patients is going to be great. It's going to address that challenge that every office should have. Not only does it reserve the spots for the new patients, which can be done on the hygiene side or the doctor side or both, but it can create excellent customer service and quick availability. And it also maximizes production and utilizes the schedule correctly. It allows you to be in charge of your own schedule, and those patients don't call another dental provider to try to get in before you can get them in your office.
Very good point.
You're also, I'm sorry, but you also use the word reserve a lot.
Yeah, I like that word because it makes the office feel like, or the patient feel like that spot is obviously reserved for them specifically, and they won't want to cancel that if it's reserved for them.
Definitely.
Exactly. All right. Well, now that Ashley and I have talked about what templating would look like for a doctor schedule and a hygiene schedule, you want to make sure that you follow these 3 rules. So first one, stick to your template. Don't just use it as a basic guideline. Not every day will be absolutely perfect, but if you have more ideal days than not, you will have better results in terms of your workload, your stress load. This will lead to less burnout and increased productions. You won't be able to properly evaluate your production template if you don't stick to it either. So set it, try it, evaluate it, and alter it if need be. So second one is holding your team accountable. So if someone schedules an appointment that doesn't follow the template, go to them and ask them what the reasoning for that was. 99% of the time, the reason is due to the patient telling the scheduler when they want to come, rather than the other way around. So if you scheduled an appointment with your primary care doctor or surgery at the hospital, they normally just tell you when you can be seen. And dental can follow the same pattern, and it does in certain fields such as oral surgery. Most oral surgeons only schedule sedation in the morning or on certain days so that they group those patients together. We're doing the same thing here. If a patient requests a non-producing appointment in the morning, but you only do those types of appointments in the afternoon, you just tell your patient that the doctor only reserves those types of appointments in his schedule for the afternoon. And eventually your patients are going to learn, you do have to educate them and train them, but it's just like how you trained your patients to pay their estimated copay at the time of service rather than waiting for them to get their bill in the mail. So it is possible. And number 3 is set rules and protocols for when you need to or can book outside the template. So like I was saying earlier with Maria, so for example, my office had a protocol that if the schedule wasn't full 24 hours prior, then we could fill the schedule with anything, because it was better to have a full staff on site and have a full schedule rather than your full staff on site and have a bunch of openings. You can also schedule outside of the template if the provider requests it, or if a patient absolutely cannot do another time and you obtain approval from the provider. So that wraps up production templating. We're going to pivot now to a different aspect of your productive foundations. And Jackie's going to go over the verbal skills for patient communications.
So before we do that, because you touched on something right now, first of all, what I'm hearing here is communication is definitely very important. I think that if a patient were to come in and there was openings, I think it's incumbent upon the front desk to ask the back office people, hey, we've got an emergency patient coming in place, and you guys okay with that? Because who knows, it could mean something, right? It could
Same day treatment.
Same day. And that's one of the things I was going to say and touch on, is that if there is time within the schedule and you're also looking to huddle, and let's say you still had not filled the schedule, I'm sure you're probably going to talk about this, and I probably went way ahead of time, ahead of the game, like I always do. But same day treatment, guys, look for those types of patients coming into your schedule for the day. And I'm sorry ahead of time if I went and talked about
No, that's fine. It's all good points.
Yes.
All good points. All right, let's switch over to
By the way, we've got a couple comments. Super hygiene days on anticipated holidays. Fantastic idea.
Right.
And someone else said, absolutely love this. So
Thank you.
Well, you guys have shared so many great points already. Definitely important to effectively schedule and be creative, but also stay within the parameters. You set those templates for a good reason, but communicate with your team if you can, and go outside of that just to fill your schedules. So the next step we're going to pivot on to a little bit here is effective communication, especially with your patients, but also amongst the team. And part of that is also your confirmation process. Let's move forward here. There we go. So I first want to talk about just the most common but avoidable reasons that somebody might reschedule for an appointment. Quite often the appointment at the confirmation call, the patient's kind of caught off guard perhaps by the length of their appointment. So we want to make sure when we're scheduling to make sure that we're informing the patient of how long their next visit is. We're all busy these days. The patient's work-life schedules are no different. They're trying to squeeze it all in too. And it might sound like a simple effort, but it definitely helps communicate with them, because you'd hate to have an opening in your schedule, especially for the long appointments, which I tend to find are the ones that really surprise the patients the most.
Right.
They have it in their mind that they're going to be in and out in an hour, just like their hygiene visits, maybe even sometimes less than that. And if they're only finding out at your confirmation call that they're going to be with you for an hour and a half, 2 hours, perhaps, it might not fit into what they were expecting. So I think it's definitely a good tool to make sure we're communicating that to them. And it's a courtesy. We're also trying to be courteous of them. We respect their time. We want them to respect ours and keep those appointments. Okay. It's also another opportunity when you're doing your confirmation calls to remind them to come in on time, which I know is always a topic that everyone's concerned with in the dental office, making sure we're starting on time and the patients are here early. Another really common reason for rescheduling is when the patient is surprised by their expected copay. Of course, this is something we battle
Right.
every day. Is setting the expectation that we need to collect their co-payments at the time of service, which is always just best practices. But other than just the assumed that they have to pay something, is letting them know exactly what they do have to pay.
But I think it's like, it also great points, Jackie. There's something that Alicia had stated. It's like training your patients, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I think if you set the foundations of your practice and what the expectations are, it takes out the guessing game and it establishes transparency and most of all clarity. Because the one thing that patients don't like are surprises.
Yeah. And in following that, there should be multiple points of communication, especially when you're talking about the financial aspect. It should be discussed at the time of treatment planning. When you're presenting them their treatment plan, there should be a financial aspect to that review. It should be discussed when scheduling as well. So when they're booking that appointment, which isn't always necessarily on the same day it's treatment planned, reminding them that they have an expected copay for that service that they're booking. And then of course, again, when we're doing their confirmation call, and of course you're going to mention it when they're in the office, but those are your 3 opportunities to inform them ahead of time, well ahead of time, making sure that they're comfortable and they understand and know what they're paying for so that they're prepared when they do come into the practice. And I think, we definitely owe that clarity to our patients to make sure that they're aware of that. So that was the second reason that we wanted to make note of, that very common reason someone might reschedule for an appointment. And the next one here is just, these last 2 bits are pretty straightforward. Anytime there's a change in your schedule, if you're deviating from what they originally expected for their appointment to be, which can be a change in their treatment or their provider, make sure that we're letting them know about this ahead of time. We've all heard it where patients are super loyal to their hygienist. They're super loyal, of course, to their dentist and even the assistant. Sometimes I've had people say, I'm not coming in with Dr. So-and-so unless Jane's there. They get very attached. And honestly, I love hearing this because it means you've got a great team and they're building a really great rapport with the patients. So it's a simple thing to do, but definitely inform your patients with changes like that. And of course, make sure that your patients are aware of your cancellation policy, if you have one. If you require 24-hour notice, make sure that they are aware of that. It can be something you include in your new patient paperwork, perhaps, or perhaps it's something that you talk about on the phone when and if they're calling to reschedule. A polite reminder, a simple way to say, I understand you might need to move your appointment. I just want to remind you, we do require 24-hour notice. So if you can please give us a call early next time. It's a polite message. I don't think it's, anything outside the box. It's just definitely making sure that they know that we need to maintain our schedules and take good care of our patients. And it's hard for us to get people in last minute if they can't keep their visit.
Something I kind of want to, add to this. And if there are any hygienists out there, so forgive me. Okay. I'm going to preface that, but you mentioned that there are patients that don't want to reschedule maybe because, their hygienist like Ashley is not in. But if we were to, let's say, have that camaraderie, if you will, and getting your team to have the scripting or feel comfortable in saying like, I know that Ashley's not here today, but you have to have your active periodontal treatment taken care of. And today we have Jackie, and I know that Ashley would still want you to keep this appointment. I think that communication is very important, because who's to say when they're going to see Ashley again and when's the next availability for that, right?
Yeah. No, thank you for bringing that up, because of course the original point was let's inform properly up ahead of time so we're not surprising them. But that's a really good point. There are going to be times when things change. Someone might be out sick or an unplanned, or a planned vacation perhaps, and now we have to pivot. We have to make sure our patients still get the care that they need, and we need to keep our schedules full. So yeah, I think that that's a really great tactic, is to, speak highly of our other providers that are in the office, make sure the patients feel really comfortable, and remind them how important it is to stay on their pattern of care as much as possible, if we can't avoid it otherwise.
And I don't know if we're going to be talking about this. So once again, I apologize if I'm not bringing something up, but also let's say if Ashley's going on vacation, we just don't want to shut down hygiene, right? So Ashley's probably going to say, Alicia, I'm going to be on vacation. I'm finally going to Bermuda. I need that long time vacation.
That sounds really nice.
It's been waiting for me, but I got to tell you, Jackie's wonderful. She's just as good as I am. And, she's with a patient right now, but if we had time, I'd introduce you to her, but she's going to take care of you when you come back for your peri maintenance.
Yeah.
Perhaps, so.
Well, we've all heard this phrase before, tried and true, inform before you perform. it's, definitely the classic line, and it applies to all the slides that we've had previously, but also definitely moving forward into the next slide. So I'm going to hand it off over here. Ashley, you're going to help me on this next one.
Yeah.
So we're talking here a little bit about, of course, taking payment ahead of time. And really what this is meant to do is to create buy-in and commitment with our patients, which I think is a really great thing. It's definitely going to contribute to keeping your schedules full. I think it also is definitely going to improve your over-the-counter collections, which is always a great thing when running, your practice and running it as a business. Ashley, I know you've had some really great success with this in your practices. Can you maybe speak to that a little bit of how you guys manage doing a pay ahead or a prepay?
Absolutely. So I love to see offices that prepay for those large, or have patients prepay for those large treatment items. I like the rule of threes. So they take the total patient copay due and divide it by 3. So for instance, if it's a crown, you're going to take 1/3 down at the time of scheduling, 1/3 at that prep, and 1/3 at the seat. So it's a great way to increase the patient commitment to you and the office. And it, like Jackie said, creates that buy-in. So they don't want to cancel. They've already got money invested in the appointment.
Definitely. Very true. Very true. All right. And this one I want to talk a little bit about our verbal skills when we're communicating. So definitely an opportunity to elevate our verbal skills when we're talking about scheduling. It might sound a little silly, maybe not that important, but definitely a few simple word choices can put a really positive and impactful spin on your everyday language. I'm sure sometimes your admin teams or yourselves, if we've got people that work up front, you're saying the same things all the time. Maybe you're feeling a little bit like a robot, and maybe you're just delivering the same messages and not really getting much success with your results. So something easy to try is just to speak of these appointments with high regard. And we touched on this a little bit earlier on our webinar here, is rather than referring to them as, oh, your upcoming visit, or, we got a booked spot for you, and speaking of it rather casually, or even using the word, oh, we get cancellations all the time. It creates an atmosphere that we don't look at these appointments as valuable time, both for our patients who need to have this treatment done, and also for our office and our providers. Their time is very valuable as well. So reserving time for our patients, talking about, we have your reserved appointment, your reserved time on our schedule, definitely brings that customer service level and that air of importance up another notch. So although it might be one tiny little tweak to what you're talking about, I think it delivers a different and a stronger message to your patients that we're reserving this. It's important time. We really want them to come in and get this work done, because number one, besides everything else in our schedules, our patients getting the care that they need is always number one. So, and us speaking of it that way brings it to that same level of importance, I think.
Right. So we have Dr. Liu that's asking the question, can you explain your rule of thirds again, Ashley?
Yeah. So if their copay happens to be $1,000 for a procedure, I like them to pay 1/3 of that at the scheduling time. So to reserve that appointment, Ms. Jones, you can go ahead and pay 1/3 of that now, and then 1/3 of that at the seat date, or I'm sorry, at the prep date, and then 1/3 at the seat date. So you collect that full amount, but you spread it over 3 payments, and it creates buy-in.
I think it's also offering them an opportunity for flexibility with pay.
Absolutely.
Some patients that might not have that $1,000 all in one chunk.
Right.
It's,
Exactly.
Again, another extension of courtesy that we give to our patients.
Yeah.
Right.
And Jackie, on that point with just tweaking verbiage, I like to remind the patients that they're late for their periodic exams, like when I'm calling to remind them of their hygiene appointments. But instead of using maybe the periodic exam that they're due for their cleaning and their exam, I use the word oral cancer screenings. And that way it creates value and urgency along with it.
Definitely. But we're telling them the truth too. It is a service that we're giving them. We want them to stay on a regular increment for having those checks.
Right.
So, it's important.
And speaking of verbiage and vernacular, I mean, we've always used the term, instead of SRPs or perio root cleaning, it's active. You have active periodontal disease.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right. So Ashley, I know our next slide here, a little bit being creative, thinking outside the box. I know you had a few ideas you wanted to share on this. What do you got?
So if you help create the framework about your rescheduled appointments and how your office should handle those. Everybody should obviously be on the same page when it comes to cancellation. So right now we have COVID going on. So if somebody cancels because of that, you don't necessarily want to call them in 3 days to have them come back in for that appointment that they missed. So everybody has to be on the same page on how you should handle that, whether you're using an ASAP or a short list to put those patients that have canceled back on. So if someone calls to cancel because they decided to go boating at the last minute, you probably don't want to reward them by calling them to get them back in or putting them on the next day. So you're going to want to space those appointments out and kind of show that you're in control of your schedule. But obviously, if somebody cancels because their babysitter's sick, you're going to want to put them on a different date. Put them on that ASAP or that short list call and make sure that you get those patients in, with some urgency.
Definitely. And we all know life happens, things change, things come up. We've been there ourselves as patients at doctors' offices. Sometimes just asking the question, is there anything we can help, if anything we can do to help get you to come in? You never know. Sometimes they're just like, well, if it was a half hour later, I'd come in. And without asking those leading questions, we miss that opportunity to possibly make a little tweak or make a little change. This is a real outside the box idea, but in conversations with another colleague at one of their offices, they called an Uber and had their patient come in. And now
I've actually done that before.
This wasn't just, a desperation to keep their schedules full.
Yeah.
This was an older patient.
Right.
Her son gives her all of her rides. He's stuck at work and she lived relatively close. But I mean, let's look at it this way. Even a $35 Uber fee, that's, a real polite, really great extension of courtesy to our patients, is a small price to pay for a $2,000 service. If you look at it in that perspective, but number one, we're giving excellent patient care. We're really doing everything we can to help our patients, help them come in for their appointments. And I know that's kind of a little bit of a rogue idea, but
I've actually
done it too.
I've done it myself. And I know of other practices that have actually called Lyft or Uber, or even taxi if worst case scenario. However,
I've actually physically he only lived like 5 minutes around the corner, but I physically, for an elderly patient, have picked them up and dropped them off after their appointment.
And those patients are lifetime patients. They're never going to forget what service you provided them. And they're always going to be dedicated to your office.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things, though, that I think it's also very important is that anybody that's utilizing a patient engagement needs to make sure that they set up the cadence as well. Right. Yeah. Correctly. So that your patients are getting the text messages or the email, that communication for sure to remind them, if you will.
Yeah. These are all really great points. I'd love if anybody wants to put them in the chat. If you have other creative ideas for things that you've done in your past, trying to keep your schedules full, but at the same time helping your patients, I'd love it if you guys wanted to share those, because I think that they're already great ideas. So we're here, guys. It's happening. The schedule's falling apart. We finally come to that point in our conversation tonight about, rather than our proactive steps that we want to take to make sure our schedules are set up the best way possible. Now it's time. We're in a reactionary period. We need to start taking action. Phone starts ringing. Someone's calling out because school's canceled tomorrow. There's a snowstorm, which could be a reality tomorrow. Or someone's just unable to come in and it's the last minute and there's nothing we can do about it. We can't keep them on the schedule. What do we do now? So we're going to talk a little bit about what these next steps are. I don't want anyone to stress. We've got some good ideas to help be creative with how you're looking through your schedule. So let's review a little bit on what we can do when it's time to take action. So from here, we're going to talk a little bit about our best go-to resources when filling your schedule last minute. We definitely want to be working smarter, not harder. I know it's kind of a worn out phrase, but it still rings true every time. And how to identify opportunities which are already in your schedule, which I think is such a great resource because it's like, it's right underneath your nose. You just have to find it. So I'm going to hand this over to Alicia. Alicia, if you can tell us a little bit more about patient lists and how our viewers can use them to fill the schedule.
Of course. So there's a lot of go-to resources available in most practice management softwares where you can pull patients from who are not on your schedule and should be. So the very first one, the ASAP or short call list, should be your number one resource to fill last minute openings. So make sure that when you're scheduling an appointment for a patient, that you make sure to put that patient on that list if they want to be. Your list could be full of patients that say, if you have a sooner opening on a Wednesday, let me know. Or you could be even more proactive and tell the patient, hey, if I get a sooner opening, would you like me to let you know? If so, what days or times are you typically available? If you don't build that list, it's not going to be a resource. So make it part of your process for scheduling an appointment. So the next one is the broken appointment list or reschedule list. And that should be your second resource to fill a last minute opening or even openings for the next few days or few weeks out, depending on how far you typically like to see your schedule solidly booked. So in my last office, we made it a priority to go through our reschedule list once a month. By going through that list on a regular basis, our patients had constant communication with us, and it kept our list fairly short, which made it very manageable. Most of the time, if I did contact a patient from the reschedule list and they answered, the patient would say, oh, I've been meaning to call you and I keep forgetting, or I only remember to call you when you're closed. So that's always really nice that it actually does work. And then make sure to make a personal connection. So if a patient cancels due to an illness and you call to follow up a couple of weeks later, ask them how they're feeling and if the illness went away. So I can't tell you how many times I've been able to create a really positive relationship with a patient because I noted down that a patient canceled due to being hospitalized. And I called them in a few weeks or a month later just to see how they're doing. And I always start the conversation out with how they're doing. And the fact that I'm actually calling to reschedule their appointment from the patient's perspective is just a side note. So they think I'm actually genuinely calling to see how they're doing, which I am, but my number one priority is to book my schedule. So I just go about it in a way that it comes across that I'm a, very caring individual. Not that I'm not, but you guys understand.
You're using these lists to help us. You are a genuine caring person, but we're trying to get a job done. We're using lists to help us get there.
Exactly. So the next list is the overdue recall list. And that's a great resource for openings in your hygiene schedule, whether you're looking at the same day, the next day, or even months in the future. So I personally have a campaign that's built that periodically does text people who are overdue, and that does get good results. But I also sometimes like to send an additional, more personalized text to those on the recall list. And also, I like to get my elderly patients with phone calls that don't usually text back from the recall list. The great thing about elderly patients is if you have an opening at like 11 a.m., they're your people to take it because they're probably not doing anything anyways. So you always answer the phone because they're not at work and they're not tending kids.
Right. I do want to say something about recall lists and hygiene. Once again, forgive me, hygienists in the room. I've actually had hygienists call their patients to help fill the schedules because you've formed
That connection.
And you tell them like, hey, Sue, I've got this opening. I'd really like you to come in. I've got 10 o'clock. I'm going to pencil you in. You good with that? And Sue's going to want to come in because she loves Ashley, so.
That was a good tactic though to use, especially if there is a no-show on your schedule.
Right.
That hygienist now has probably around an hour of open time. The first call should be the person that just missed their appointment to say, hey, I was really looking forward to seeing you.
Mhm.
I hope we can get you back in soon. I was, looking forward to catching up. Please give us a call. The second thing they do is start working that list, and they can, a lot of the lists, you can identify who they were originally scheduled by, so they can call their people, make that personal touch, say, hey, you haven't been in a while. You're overdue for coming in. Give me a call. I've got some time coming up in the next couple of weeks, and that's, to me, that goes lengths to think, oh, wow, my provider made time in their own day to give me a call. And
Ashley, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to call patients when they would cancel for sure. Obviously, like Alicia said, just checking in on them. Miss Jones, it looked like you missed your appointment. Hope everything's okay. I know you were getting ready to come back from Florida the last time we talked. Like I said, hope everything's okay. Just want to get you back on the schedule. I really want to see you.
Love that. Okay, so the next list is the unscheduled treatment list or unscheduled treatment report. So that's a great resource to fill openings, but I personally don't usually use this to fill immediate openings on my schedule. And the reason why is because it's usually a really long list with a lot of information. Going through this list regularly, though, will help you keep tabs on your patients and keep it a little bit more manageable. Patients, of course, end up on this list because a treatment was recommended to them and they chose not to schedule it for whatever reason. Some of those patients will be on the list because they wanted to look at their finances, or some will be because they genuinely didn't want to schedule. So if you reach out to the patients on this list, there will be some patients that will schedule because they'll say, you know, thanks for reminding me, I've been meaning to call and schedule. But that is a resource that you can use to fill your schedule. And then I want to talk about patient lists, and this is CareStack specific. So patient lists are custom lists that you can create in CareStack for an infinite number of reasons. My favorite way to view patient lists is to create an overdue recall list or an unscheduled treatment list, so I can send out a blast text message to multiple patients at once.
And you can do that specific by code too, right, Alicia?
Yeah, I'm actually going to talk about that in the next slide if you want to go to that.
Perfect.
But patient lists is probably one of my top features in CareStack. So these are just a few screenshots of some examples, and I do have it broken down by code. But if you have some holes in your schedule to fill that aren't immediate, so you are following the schedule template, you can use a patient list and create a more dialed down version of the unscheduled treatment. I like to create a list like this example. So patients without upcoming appointments in the next 6 months, and patients with treatment plans that have unscheduled codes for the specific codes that are on here, which are like the major service categories: root canals, crowns, bridges. Once you've decided what type of criteria you want the list to be filtered by, you can select additional filters of what you would want to see, so you know who you want to contact and who you don't. So I typically like to see the patient's next upcoming appointment, because if they have an upcoming appointment next week with Dr. Jones, I'm probably not going to call them to be like, hey, I have an opening tomorrow for your crown, because they're probably going to do that eventually, you know. And then you can select all of those patients on the list and then just deselect who you don't want to send the text to. You can send out a big blast text to everybody all in one shot.
Or you can do it one by one if you want to do that.
Yeah, or you can do it one by one. Totally.
Right,
yeah. And another way that I like to use patient lists is for hygiene. And I have two different hygiene patient lists. So one is Overdue Hygiene, and they're actually scheduled within the next month. So this is if you were to have like maybe some hygiene openings for tomorrow or even today, your day fell apart and you're trying to get these people in. You've already done the ASAP list. You've already done the unscheduled list. You still have openings. I like to send out a text and say, hey, I know you're on our schedule already, but I happen to have an opening sooner because they're already due. And another list that I like to do for hygiene is, you know, Overdue Hygiene, and they're not scheduled. And so that's just nice to send that extra personalized text about getting a patient in that's in addition to your regular overdue recall campaign, if you have that already. And then this will target patients who would already be on your reschedule list, most likely, and for sure on your recall list. But it's just another resource for you to utilize. So now that we've covered all of our list resources, Jackie's going to go over another resource that's not attached to a list.
So this one I'm just going to talk about briefly, everyone. These are some kind of unique ways to try to get creative when you're trying to fill your schedule. One of them is looking ahead at the same day, same time as your opening. So, you know, once I've exhausted my list, I've gone through everything that's, you know, kind of concrete, I'm going to have to start getting creative. So if I know that, for example, tomorrow, Friday morning, I have an opening at 10 o'clock. If I can't find anybody else on those, you know, tried and true lists, I'm going to start looking ahead on Fridays around the 10 o'clock hour for people who are already booked who might want to come in sooner, which is, you know, this is when you're, this is when you might not find a traditional report for, but my logic and my, you know, common sense I'm trying to work here is saying, well, this person's already picked Fridays at 10. So chances are this might be a good time for them. So I'm going to call those people and say, hey, want to come in earlier, maybe I have a spot open.
Right.
Of course, you're looking at the services, making sure it's a treatment that the patient can come in earlier for.
Yeah. Especially like if it's a cleaning and it has to be done within 6 months and a day or what
Yeah,
have you,
there are
right?
things
Yep.
to think about. You don't want to deviate from insurance limitations, or maybe it's a crown case that we're dependent on the lab case getting back from the lab. But those are some opportunities for us to look at our schedule and start kind of thinking a little creatively about what might work out. And you're also finding people that probably have a preference for those days. Maybe it's time we make a note on their appointment that says they always love Fridays, just another useful tool for us to, definitely get those patients in, but also be able to look at our schedule wisely and find those opportunities.
Right.
And Jackie, that's why I like to book out for hygiene 6 months and 2 weeks so that you can easily pull those patients instead of booking 6 months and a day just on the dot. So you actually have a database to work through for your hygiene patients if that does happen and your schedule does fall apart.
I totally agree. I like to I've got to be careful with my hygiene ones because I've had a patient catch me on that once and they're like, well, if I do 2 weeks, eventually I'm going to be totally outside my six month cycle, which will probably take a couple of years of being a little off, but
Right.
It's definitely a good one. And another one's always those 4 o'clock spots. I think that those can always be coveted spaces that, if we're trying to fill that one up, that one's going to be an easy one to find because everyone wants to come in beginning and end of the day. So, Ashley, we're going to move on to the next slide here to talk about some opportunities in your schedule with your chart review.
Yeah. So there's opportunities in everyone's schedule that you can add on, do some additional treatment planning or additional services that you can add on to those appointments. So small things that can be added like fluoride x-rays or sealants, but there's some bigger stuff that a lot of people forget. Like you can do 1 to 3 teeth with scaling and root planing at the same time as you can do a prophy. So if you have those patients in your schedule that have a couple 4, 5, 6s in just one quadrant of their mouth, you can do a regular cleaning, obviously inform the patient that they need to have a deep cleaning in those areas, go over the consent forms, and then you can do those deep cleanings at that time, just in 1 to 3 areas at the same time as your prophy. And those can be add-on services that most insurance will pay for at the same day.
It's a good point.
Okay, so this slide is all about working smarter, not harder, like we've said before. So let's talk about same day treatment. And we have already touched on this a little bit, but if you have an opening in your doctor's schedule and a particular patient is coming in before that opening in hygiene, and they have unscheduled treatment already in their chart, call that patient and see if they want to get that done same day. So then the patient would be seen in hygiene, and right after you fill your open doctor spot with their treatment. And if you happen to have an opening in your doctor's schedule, but maybe hygiene doesn't match up, don't be afraid to bump patients up or down a little bit. Obviously call them and ask them. But in my experience, most patients are usually really good to move their appointment within 30 minutes to an hour. It's not going to mess up their day too much. But if you have a bunch of little openings, but you need to get this crown in or this root canal in, you can squeeze people up and down so you can make your opening bigger. I do know that a lot of patients, feedback I've received anyways, is they actually prefer one less trip to the dentist. So if you do have that opportunity for same day treatment, give it to them. And if they want one less trip, they'll do it. And then for additional treatment on their restorative visit, we can utilize Quadra Dentistry, which completes treatment faster. So if a doctor is doing treatment on the upper right, for example, and he diagnoses something in that quad, or even on the same side of the mouth, or even just like a simple like anterior filling, like an incisal chip, and you have time in your schedule, complete that treatment instead of rescheduling them back for one more appointment. And when a doctor is treatment planning services, get in the habit of splitting the treatment up between either quadrants or each side of the mouth. Obviously, unless it's going to be too lengthy. But that's usually a big plus to patients because they have less trips they have to make in, less babysitters they have to arrange, time off of work. And as far as your staff, that means less turnover, which equals to less overhead and less stress to the entire staff, especially.
Yep. So we got a question about SRPs and prophies. Will insurance pay if we bill same day for both?
Yeah. As long as you're billing a 4342, which is the 1 to 3 teeth, and you don't do any more than one quad, you can do the 4342 and a 1110, which is your prophy on the same day of service. And that's what I would recommend if you have those patients that have those deep pockets, and you know for sure you can do the 4342 and a prophy on the same day.
That's great. Thank you. Okay.
We have a couple of other questions. Do you recommend any systems, or what's your recommendation on systems when the schedule is clearly running behind? And I have one that I'll just kind of say, if I have like a root canal patient and I know we're running behind, and they're going to be like another 40 minutes and my next patient's not there yet, I'll call them and just say, hey, just as a heads up, we're running 40 minutes behind. So is that still going to work for you? Because if so, show up 40 minutes later than your original time. Like, stay in communication with the patients.
Did we have another question you wanted to touch on?
Yeah. Does it require perio charting for 4342?
Yeah, so 4342 is always going to require perio charting, so you would want to submit that with your prophy.
Okay, thank you. All right.
All right, so this last slide of one of our take action tips here is a fairly straightforward one, but always keeping in mind family members. This can be an untapped resource if you're not looking at your entire patient's account and looking at your schedule as a whole. If you have one family member coming in that day, you've got holes in the schedule, take a look at the rest of the family members. Some of them could be overdue for services, especially for their recall. Some of them could have unscheduled treatment or treatment scheduled kind of far out. This can be an opportunity for us to move those patients in sooner, on the first hand. So this is keeping our schedule full, of course, but also we're reaching out and saying, hey, Jane, I know your husband's also due for his cleaning. He's not booked. We've got an opening tomorrow. Do you guys want to come in together? Or especially for the kids, mom's coming in. She's probably bringing the kids with her anyways. Let's get everybody in for treatment. So looking at the family and their entire family batch of appointments as an opportunity to condense our schedules, bring everyone in together is definitely a convenience for our patients, but it also helps fill our schedules as well. So I think that that's definitely, it can be an untapped resource for us to look at that. But again, that second layer is we're looking at our patients, we're looking at their whole family and their dental health that we need to take care of. So I think that that's definitely an opportunity for us to show them we're paying attention. We care about all of you guys getting in on time. We've got an opportunity, so let's make the most of it.
Right. I think there's also something to be said about, because I know that we talked about recalls and also getting unscheduled treatment, but I know all of you ladies can agree to this, but we also have to take a look at the capacity and demand with respect to scheduling, meaning new patients, you'd want to make sure that you get them in within 14 days, right? So to also be cognizant when we are trying to fill those schedules and keeping those openings basically open and accessible for new patients, because if they can't get in, sooner than, less than 2 weeks, they're going to. And then another thing, I think somebody had asked a question, if you will, about the transportation. I just want to make sure I covered that. Are there any types of legalities when you're taking the patient or picking up the question, excuse me. I've got a dog here too. We'll pick up Lulu, if you will, a guest here, a special guest. But anyways, I would ask Alicia that. I can tell you this is that I think you'd have to get an approval, like especially with Uber and Lyft. I've usually had asked the patient if it was okay for us to do that because they needed to have that root canal done, they were in pain. We would make extensive notes, document.
Very true.
Yeah, specifically in the charts.
And of course, be careful. Your patients, only extend that offer when you feel comfortable doing it.
Right, right. And once again, this is how you can get connected with us. You have any suggestions and feedbacks, please feel free to reach us at practiceheroes@carestack.com. And once again, Alicia, Ashley, and Jackie, thank you so much for once again hanging out with me Thursday night, along with our attendees out there. And then one last thing, next month. So we talked about reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So reporting 101 is next month. We have a special guest. Her name is Wendy Thompson. She is a consultant, manager, administrator, you name it. She's a whiz when it comes to reporting. She'll also share with you her secrets, if you will, reports that she uses within CareStack. And giving her the window, if you will, as to how healthy is her practice performing. Any your thoughts on that? Because I know what Wendy had mentioned to you as well.
I think it's all about knowing your numbers, being comfortable and understanding what they mean and how you can apply them in your practice, because they can tell you a lot. I think numbers can often overwhelm people, but they can be a very useful tool for you to understand your business, to grow your business, and to perform at your best. So I think she's going to give us a lot of pearls of wisdom on that.
Right. And also what kind of reports you should run. I see Lulu. I don't know if you guys see Lulu. Jack's dog. I'm going like, what is that? But I forgot she found her at the couch. So anyways, I want to thank everybody once again for joining us tonight. You guys are all troopers out there. Please make sure that you email us for your Grubhub. Remember, dinner's on us. Next month, once again, reporting 101. Really, what kind of reports should you be actually running? What is your CPA wants to see? What is gap accounting, and what are those, those accountants want to see? What kind of reports as well? We're going to go ahead and share that all with you next month, March 22nd, Tuesday, 7 p.m. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.